My name's Peter Cusack. I'm a musician, sound recordist and a sound artist. And my career, well, I started playing musical instruments when I was young, clarinet and piano, but I changed to the guitar when I was a teenager, and that's the one I've played ever since. But also I've had a long interest in making sound recordings and in the sound of the environment. And that started through an interest in wildlife. I was very keen to record birds singing, which is how I started, but then that quickly grew into an interest in all the sounds in our sound environment. Well, for me, free improvisation is when people play together. It's almost entirely a group activity as far as I'm concerned, where there's no pre-planning, no composition. You just react to each other as you play, and that's it. I started playing free improvisation in the late 60s, early 70s, as a result of listening to Derek Bailey and Evan Parker, the first generation British free improvisers, on the radio. I didn't live in London at the time, I was in Edinburgh. But I heard them playing on the radio and I found it really interesting and wanted to play myself. And when I did move to London, I met people like Simon Mayo, who's a clarinet player. He no longer plays, but we were a duo for quite a long time. He was my main musical partner at the time. But then, of course, I met everybody else, and free improvisers are very keen just to try different combinations all the time. So you end up by playing with everybody who's around to play with. But out of that came a couple of groups which lasted longer. One was Alterations with Steve Beresford, David Toop and Terry Day, and that formed in 1977 and lasted until 1986, so 9 years essentially, which was quite a long life for an improvising group. And the other group I formed after that was called Kondo Style, but that wasn't a straight improvising group. We also played songs and compositions, so it was a mixture. And that was a larger group, 7 people, with a singer. Kazuka Hoki was the singer to start with, and then Viv Corringham became the vocalist. So those were the 2 longer lasting groups that I played in. But during that time I also lived in Holland for 4 years, and I played with the Dutch musicians, particularly Guus Janssen, who's a piano player, and Martin Alten, who was a bass player, and others, and worked a lot in Holland, Belgium at that time. So that introduced me to the continental free improvising scene, which I've kept in touch with ever since. The first album I made was called Milk Teeth, and that was with my clarinetist friend Simon Mayo. And this was 1973 as far as 1974. And in those days, no record company was interested in improvised music. All the productions were done by the musicians themselves. And ours was no exception. We produced it ourselves, and we even set up a record company called DAAD Records, which went on to produce 25 so LPs and a few CDs. Not just of us, but of other people also. So that was the first LP. And I made them with groups, with alterations. I made them in Holland with Guus Janssen, Martin Altener, Paul Lovens was on one, Evan Parker, Paul Lytton. So over the years there's been a number. I also made a solo. The first solo was called Where is the Green Parrot? And that's out on the RER Megacore label. I think that's probably still available, although I'm not sure. And then onwards. I don't think I want to list them all. Yes, I mean, I lived in London, so that was I started Favourite Sounds of London basically because I was here. But actually, that was quite interesting. It was the start of ResonanceFM, and in 1998, they got a month license to broadcast and asked people to do projects. So the first idea of Favourite Sounds of London came from a broadcast for Resonance FM in 1998. Well, I've always had an interest in sound. When I was young, I was a fanatical bird watcher, so I learnt to recognise birds through their songs and their calls. And when it became possible to make recordings, I first wanted to record animals and birds. But after that, I quickly became interested in all the sounds that are in the environment and in the sound environment as a whole. And that's what I've been busy with now for quite a long time, as a parallel activity to my music. Well, my interest in the sound environment has a little to do with green politics also, and in particular the big issues of the environment today, of which there are of course many. So I've been interested in using sound recording, or even more basically listening to the sounds of places to try and get information about what's happening there and about the places themselves. And Sounds from Dangerous Places was a project to record and to listen to areas which are hugely damaged. Oil fields through massive oil spillages and pollution, and also in Chernobyl, which was a huge nuclear disaster. But other smaller places as well, and those in the UK, like around the nuclear power stations that we have here, or big waste dumps, or even around military lands, which are often interesting places because they exclude people, and that makes a difference. Wildlife actually does quite well in military zones because the people aren't there to disturb them, or every now and again they fire guns and shells go off, but there's not people there every day disturbing wildlife. So often they become interesting for that reason. All of those places are dangerous, either in an environmental sense or in terms of military. They're obviously dangerous from a warfare point of view. So those have been the dangerous places that have interested me. Gradually my work has changed over the years, and I started taking photographs because I just wanted a visual documentation of where I had made the recording. But over time, the photographs became more interesting to me for themselves. And now I often end up taking many photographs and not so many recordings. It depends on the place. And I'm looking all the time for ways of presenting the sounds together with the photographs, both in exhibitions or in books or CDs with books, or now in performance. I'm working on performances where I can improvise with the guitar, play field recordings and project photographs in different ways all at the same time, and kind of play it rather than have it set in as videos or in some predetermined sequence. Well, mostly I'm a guitarist, but I've always been interested in musics from all over the world, in particular from Eastern Europe and the Middle East, Turkey, Central Asia. So I tried to play some of those instruments. The first was the bouzouki, which is from Greece. And other friends of mine, Max Easley, for example, had a big interest in Greek rembetika music. So we tried to play that together, learning from the records. Vivian Corringham used to sing as well. So that was my introduction to bouzouki, and of course I used it in improvised music too. But it isn't as versatile in improvisation as a normal guitar. It has only 4 strings, and the range just isn't the same as a guitar, so I don't think I ever did so much with the bouzouki in improvised music, and I was not the only one either. Derek Bailey used to play the bouzouki sometimes, and so did others, so it wasn't specific to me. So unlike many improvising musicians who have got tabletops full of many things, toys, junk, anything they find that makes an interesting sound, I never really did that. I've very much stuck to the guitar. For quite a long time I played the electric guitar as well, but now it's just the classical guitar, and I have gradually started bringing field recordings into improvisation as well. To start with, that was on cassettes, but now of course it's on a computer with a sampler and an iPad program which triggers what happens when. still think that improvised music is fairly difficult for commercial concerns to assimilate. I don't really think that's happened to improvised music. If you compare it with punk, which started as a kind of street garage type movement, most of which happened because the musicians or the designers or the set up their own ways of doing it. I mean, that very quickly became very commercial. Well, that's never happened to improvised music, and it's never happened to large areas of what sometimes still gets called the avant-garde. I mean, sound poetry has never become commercial. Kind of in visual art, maybe there are plenty of areas still there in installations, video art, which you'd never describe as commercial. So assimilation, I think, is inherently quite difficult for certain technologies and for certain attitudes towards making work. So I'm slightly less bothered about that in terms of improvised music. It'll always be a minority taste as far as I'm concerned, as far as I can see, rather.